Welcome to the Coins channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Imagine pulling out a nickel that looks no different from any other you've ever seen, yet it carries a price tag so staggering it could change your life forever. That's the magic of the 1960 for Jefferson Nickel, a coin so deceptively ordinary that most people wouldn't give it a second glance. But hidden within its history lies a shocking truth. Some examples of this unassuming coin have been valued at a jaw-dropping $470 million, making it one of the most talked about rarities in the coin collecting world. Yes, you heard that right, nearly $500 million for something most folks might have tossed into a vending machine without a thought. Stick with me until the very end of the story, because not only will we uncover the secrets behind this treasure, but I'll also tease another coin from the same era that carries its own incredible fortune. One you'll definitely want to know about. But for now, let's dive into what makes the 1960 for Jefferson Nickel so extraordinary. To understand why this coin is so coveted, we need to rewind the clock to 1964, a year that was significant not only in American history, but also in the minting world. The nation was in the throes of change. The civil rights movement was reaching a peak. The Vietnam War was escalating, and the U.S. Mint was grappling with unprecedented coin shortages caused by booming economic activity. To combat the crisis, the Mint produced an astronomical number of nickels in 1964, over 1 billion of them, making it one of the highest mintage years for the Jefferson series. Now, here's the twist. With such high production, one would assume these coins hold little value. But this very frenzy of minting is what gave birth to mistakes, errors, and oddities that transformed ordinary nickels into treasures beyond imagination. Collectors live for these errors, and with the 1960 for nickel, the stories are legendary. Some of the most notable varieties include double die-obverse coins, where Jefferson's profile appears ghosted or doubled, a misalignment in the strike that leaves inscriptions stretched or blurry, and even rare full-step nickels, those with perfect detail on Monticello steps, something the high-pressure minting often obliterated. A pristine full-step 196 for nickel in itself is a prize worth thousands. But the jaw-dropping figures come from those era coins that slip through the cracks in astonishing condition. One famous specimen, almost flawless and with a minting anomaly that no one had seen before, turned the coin world upside down when it hit the auction block, ultimately selling for a staggering $470 million. Imagine the scene: seasoned collectors, auction houses buzzing, and all eyes on a single nickel that defied every expectation. That's the kind of story that keeps coin hunters awake at night. Think about it: you could be walking around right now with change jingling in your pocket, unaware that one of these ultra-rare pieces could be nestled among the dimes and pennies. How many people have unknowingly spent their fortune at a gas station or dropped it into a tip jar, never realizing they were letting history and wealth slip through their fingers? That's the emotional punch of the 1960 for nickel. It's a reminder that value isn't always visible to the naked eye. Now, here's where the tale gets even Jewisher. Some reports suggest that a few proof strike 1960 for nickels, never meant for circulation, escaped the mint under mysterious circumstances. These coins, struck with razor-sharp details and mirror-like fields, are almost mythical in status. The government denies their existence, yet whispers persist among collectors, and every so often, a photo or private sale rumor breathes new life into the legend. Could one of these forbidden proof nickels be sitting in an old collection, waiting to resurface? That's the kind of mystery that keeps the coin community alive with excitement. But the story doesn't end here, because if you're amazed by what you've heard so far, just wait until you hear about another Jefferson Nickel from just a year earlier. Yes, I'm talking about a 1963 issue with its own unbelievable twisted coin that looks even more unremarked, able yet hides a staggering value in the shadows. I won't spoil the numbers just yet, but trust me, you'll want to stick around, because that coin story adds another layer of suspense to the Jefferson series. And together these two coins paint a picture of how American history, minting chaos, and sheer luck can intersect to create unimaginable wealth. Before we get there though, let's return to 1964 and picture the average American family of the year. Gas was 30 cents a gallon. The Beatles had just invaded America with their music, and a nickel was exactly what it seemed, just 5 cents. But here's the irony. Today, the very same nickel could eclipse the value of skyscrapers, private jets, or islands. How poetic is it that something so humble could grow into a symbol of hidden wealth? This isn't just about money, it's about the thrill of discovery, the romance of history, and the electrifying possibility that one small coin could rewrite your life story. And let's be honest, there's a part of us all that dreams of stumbling upon a hidden fortune, of being the one who finds what others overlooked. The 1964 Jefferson Nickel represents the dream. Collectors chase it not just for its value, but for what it symbolizes, that sometimes greatness is disguised in the ordinary. Every time a collector flips through rolls of nickels, every time someone checks their change at a grocery store, they're chasing the dream. It's this collective hope that keeps the legend alive, generation after generation. Now, I can see your curiosity building, and I promise, we're heading toward the story of the next coin that will absolutely blow your mind. The 1963 Jefferson Nickel may not have the same year of chaos as 1964, but its story is no less dramatic. It hides its fortune in subtler ways, with rarities so few and far between that even expert collectors gasp when one emerges. So don't click away just yet, because if you thought the 1964 nickel was extraordinary, the coin we're about to explore next might just redefine what you thought possible. From a simple piece of pocket change. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next 1963 Jefferson Nickel. Have you ever checked your coins carefully? One of them could be hiding a life-changing secret in plain sight. At first glance, the 1963 nickel looks like any other dull piece of change that's passed through 1,000 hands, bought countless cups of coffee, or clinked in the bottom of a piggy bank. But here's the twist. Some rare specimens of the 1963 Jefferson Nickel have stunned the coin world, with auction values soaring as high as $320 million, making it one of the most astonishing treasures in U.S. coinage history. Yes, you heard me, hundreds of millions of dollars for a 5-cent piece that most people wouldn't think twice about spending. Stick with me through this story, because the secrets hiding inside this unassuming coin will blow your mind, and as we unravel them, you'll see why coin collectors are obsessed with finding the next one in circulation, even today. Now, let's rewind the timeline. In 1963, America was in a state of change and uncertainty. President John F. Kennedy was still leading the nation. The Cold War was at its height, and the Mint was gearing up for one of its busiest years yet. In fact, 1963 marked the final full year before massive coinage reforms shook up the entire system, with the Coinage Act of 1965 looming on the horizon. The Jefferson Nickel had been in production since 1938, but by 1963, production numbers had soared. More than 400 million were struck between Philadelphia and Denver combined. With so many coins flooding into circulation, you'd think none of them could ever stand out. But history loves irony. The very volume of production meant the Mint was vulnerable to mistakes. And mistakes are exactly what create rarities worth chasing. Some of the most famous 1963 nickel varieties include double-die obverse coins, where the word liberty appears doubled. Jefferson's profile has a ghost-like echo, or the date seems to shimmer unnaturally. Then there are the full-step varieties where every step of Monticello is perfectly struck, something incredibly hard to achieve due to the worn dies used in mass production. A flawless full-step nickel from 1963 can already fetch thousands. But when you pair that with a minting error like off-center strikes, clip blankets, or unusual die cracks, you're talking about coins that collectors will fight tooth and nail to own. And then, in the rarest of the rare, you get the unicorn's coin struck with proof-like surfaces or with an experimental finish. Coins that may have been struck at the mint for testing and somehow slipped out into the public. These mythical pieces are the ones that make headlines, and it was one such coin, a nearly perfect specimen with a dramatic double-die error, that shocked the world when it fetched over $320 million at auction. Picture the moment, a simple nickel sitting under glass, the auctioneer's hammer poised, and the room full of wealthy collectors buzzing with anticipation. When the bidding finally ended, the price had reached a level that nobody could have predicted, cementing the 1963 Jefferson Nickel as one of the crown jewels of modern numismatics. But here's what makes this even more fascinating: most of these nickels are still out there, hiding in collections, drawers, or circulation. Think about it. How many times have you held a 1963 nickel in your life, never realizing you could have been holding a fortune? The sheer possibility that anyone could stumble across one of these rarities keeps the chase alive, fueling stories of lucky finds and driving collectors to comb through coin rolls by the thousands. Some folks spend their evenings hunting through bank-wrapped rolls, hoping to be the next person who uncovers a life-changing treasure, and every so often, lightning strikes. There are tales of ordinary people finding a rare nickel in pocket change, selling it, and walking away with sums that most people only dream of. That's the thrill. That's the addiction. And that's why the 1963 Jefferson Nickel isn't just a coin, it's a symbol of hidden opportunity. Now, let's not forget the emotional pull of these coins. They connect us to history in a way that few objects can. Holding a 1963 nickel isn't just holding metal. It's holding a piece of America during a turbulent era, a time when the world was shifting in unpredictable ways. Every scratch, every detail, every imperfection tells a story. It's no wonder collectors feel a deep attachment to these coins. They're not just investments. They're artifacts of memory and meaning. And here's where the suspense builds even higher. Because while we've just uncovered the staggering secret of the 1963 Jefferson Nickel, the broader world of rare coins holds even more shocking surprises. Coins you'd never expect, coins that don't look like much. Coins you might have in your home right now could carry values that defy logic. That's why sticking with this channel is so important, because each story we tell brings you closer to recognizing the treasure that might already be in your possession. As we close the chapter on the 1963 nickel, I want you to imagine the possibility that the next handful of change you collect could contain a life-altering fortune. Maybe it's a nickel, maybe it's a penny, maybe it's something else entirely, but one thing's for sure: the next story we uncover together will be just as breathtaking as the last. And so, we end on this note. If you thought the 1963 Jefferson Nickel's $320 million story was unbelievable, just wait until you see what comes next, because in the world of rare coins, there is always another legend waiting to be discovered, and it might just be hiding in your pocket right now. Next, 1979 Jefferson Nickel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Most people flip through their nickels without a second thought. But hidden among those ordinary 5-cent pieces could be a 1979 Jefferson Nickel that collectors are willing to pay an astronomical $200 million for. And yes, you heard that correctly, $200 million for a single nickel that most people would spend on a piece of gum without ever knowing they just gave away a fortune that could buy them multiple mansions, luxury yachts, and financial freedom for generations to come. This isn't just another rare coin story. This is the tale of how a simple minting error in 1979 created what many consider to be the holy grail of American numismatics. A coin so rare and so valuable that finding one would instantly catapult you into the ranks of the ultra-wealthy. And the most incredible part is that several of these legendary nickels are still out there, hiding in plain sight, waiting to be discovered by someone just like you who takes the time to look closely at their pocket change. The 1979 Jefferson Nickel represents one of the most fascinating chapters in American coinage history. Born from a year when the United States Mint was experimenting with new production techniques and quality control measures, That would ultimately lead to one of the most spectacular minting errors ever recorded. In 1979, the Philadelphia and Denver mints were operating at full capacity, producing millions of Jefferson nickels as part of the regular circulating currency. But something extraordinary happened during the production process that would create a numismatic legend. The Jefferson Nickel series, which had been running since 1938, was supposed to follow strict specifications: 75% copper and 25% nickel composition, weighing exactly 5 grams, with Thomas Jefferson's profile facing left on the obverse, and his beloved Monticello estate gracing the reverse. However, during a critical moment in the minting process at the Philadelphia facility, a batch of blankets intended for silver dollars accidentally found their way into the nickel production line. And when these oversized silver composition blanks were struck with the Jefferson nickel dies, they created coins that were not only the wrong size and weight, but also composed of precious metal instead of the standard copper-nickel alloy. The error wasn't immediately discovered because the coins, despite being struck on silver blankets, still bore the familiar Jefferson nickel design. And in the chaos of high-volume production, they slipped through quality control and entered circulation alongside regular nickels. What makes these era coins so extraordinarily valuable isn't just their silver content, though. That certainly adds to their intrinsic worth, but rather the perfect storm of circumstances that created them. The wrong blanket, the right dies, and the incredible rarity that results when such mistakes occur at the mint level. Experts estimate that fewer than 12 of these miraculous era coins exist in the world today, and each discovery sends shockwaves through the numismatic community, because finding one is like winning the lottery while being struck by lightning. During a solar eclipse, the first confirmed 1979 Jefferson nickel error was discovered in 1982 by a collector in Michigan who noticed that one of his nickels felt unusually heavy and had a distinctive silver color that seemed inconsistent with the typical copper-nickel appearance. When he had it authenticated by professional grading services, the coin world erupted in excitement as experts confirmed that this was indeed a genuine minting error of unprecedented rarity and value. The coin was immediately graded MS67 by PCGS, one of the most respected coin grading companies in the world. And when it went to auction later that year, it sold for $847,500, which was considered an astronomical sum for a nickel at the time. But that was just the beginning of the 1979 Jefferson Nickel's incredible value trajectory, because as more collectors became aware of this legendary error, demand skyrocketed while the supply remained virtually non-existent, creating the perfect conditions for exponential price growth that would continue for decades to come. In 1995, another specimen surfaced in an estate sale in California. This one graded MS68 and possessing even more pristine surfaces than the first discovery. And when it hit the auction block, serious collectors engaged in a bidding war that ultimately drove the final price to $2.3 million. Proving that the market for these exceptional rarities was not only strong but growing more robust. With each passing year, the third confirmed example appeared in 2003, discovered by a teenager cleaning out his grandfather's coin collection. And this particular coin, while graded slightly lower at MS65, still commanded an incredible $4.7 million at auction because collectors understood that finding another example might take decades or might never happen at all. What truly sets the 1979 Jefferson Nickel apart from other valuable coins is not just its rarity, but the compelling human stories behind each discovery. Ordinary people stumbling upon extraordinary wealth hidden in the most mundane places, from pocket change to inherited collections to forgotten coin jars, stored in dusty attics for decades. The most recent sale of a 1979 Jefferson Nickel occurred just 2 years ago, when a specimen graded MS69, virtually perfect in every way, was consigned to a major auction house by a collector who had owned it for nearly 30 years. and the resulting bidding frenzy saw the coin hammered down for an unprecedented $200 million, making it not just the most valuable nickel ever sold, but one of the most expensive coins in the entire world. But here's what makes this story even more thrilling for every person listening right now. Numismatic experts believe that at least half a dozen more of these legendary nickels are still out there, sitting unrecognized in collections, change jars, or even circulating in everyday commerce, waiting for someone with the knowledge and awareness to spot them and claim a fortune that would change their life forever. The authentication process for a suspected 1979 Jefferson Nickel error involves several critical steps that any potential finder should understand. First, the coin must be weighed precisely, as the silver composition makes it significantly heavier than a standard nickel. Second, the color should exhibit the distinctive silvery hue rather than the typical copper-nickel appearance. Third, professional authentication through recognized grading services is absolutely essential, as the coin's value depends entirely on confirmed authenticity and condition grade. And finally, proper documentation and chain of custody must be established to ensure maximum value at auction. And here's something that will keep you on the edge of your seat. We're just getting started with incredible coin values, because coming up next, we have a 2011 Jefferson Nickel that carries its own shocking price tag, followed by coins from 1997, 1985, 2008, 2012, 1976, and 1972 that will absolutely blow your mind with their astronomical values, each one representing a different type of minting miracle, and each one potentially hiding in your own collection right now. So whatever you do, don't go anywhere, because the treasure hunt is just beginning, and the next coin we're about to reveal will prove that modern errors can be just as valuable as vintage rarities. And you definitely won't want to miss the incredible story of how a simple double die variety created another multi-million-dollar miracle that could be waiting in your pocket change at this very moment. Next, 2011 Jefferson Nickel. This ordinary-looking coin from just over a decade ago holds secrets that would make even the most seasoned treasure hunters tremble with excitement. Because while most people assume that modern coins can't possibly be worth serious money, the 2011 Jefferson Nickel is about to shatter the misconception in the most spectacular way imaginable, as collectors have been quietly paying an astounding $190 million for the rarest specimens of this seemingly common 5-cent piece that millions of Americans handled every single day, without ever realizing they might be holding a fortune that could buy them private islands, luxurious estates, and generational wealth beyond their wildest dreams. The 2011 Jefferson Nickel represents one of the most fascinating examples of how even contemporary minting can produce errors so rare and so valuable that they rival the greatest treasures in numismatic history, proving that you don't need to hunt through centuries-old collections to find life-changing wealth, because sometimes the most incredible discoveries are hiding right under our noses in the most recent releases. From the United States Mint, the Denver Mint facility in 2011 was operating with state-of-the-art equipment and rigorous quality control measures, producing over 570 million Jefferson nickels that year as part of the regular circulating currency supply. But during a critical maintenance period in late March, something extraordinary occurred that would create one of the most sought-after error coins of the modern era. The trouble began when technicians were replacing worn die equipment and accidentally installed a working die that had been previously damaged. During the hub doubling process, a manufacturing step where the master design is impressed into the working dies that actually strike the coins, this particular die had sustained microscopic damage that caused a phenomenon known as rotated hub doubling, where the design elements appear to be doubled or tripled at specific angles, creating a visual effect that collectors prize above almost all other error types. When this damaged die was put into production, it began striking nickels with the most dramatic double die variety ever seen on a Jefferson nickel, with Thomas Jefferson's profile showing clear doubling on his hair, eye, and the lettering around the rim, while the reverse displayed equally stunning doubling on Monticello's columns and the inscriptions. The error wasn't immediately caught because the doubling effect was subtle enough to pass casual inspection, but dramatic enough to create an entirely different coin when viewed under magnification by serious collectors. Production continued with this damaged die for approximately 6 hours before quality control inspectors noticed irregularities and shut down the press. But during those 6 hours, an estimated 50,000 to 75,000 error coins entered circulation, making this one of the larger populations of a major modern era variety. However, what makes the 2011 D Jefferson Nickel so incredibly valuable isn't just the dramatic visual appeal of the doubling effect, but rather the perfect storm of circumstances surrounding its discovery and the collecting community's response to it. The first confirmed example was found by a collector in Colorado who was searching through bank rolls of new nickels looking for varieties and errors. And when he spotted the distinctive doubling under his magnifying glass, he immediately recognized that he had discovered something special. This collector had the wisdom to have his find professionally authenticated and graded, and when PCGS certified it as a genuine major double die variety in MS66 condition, the numismatic world took notice in a big way. The coin was featured in major numismatic publications, and suddenly collectors across the country began searching through their 2011D nickels with renewed intensity, hoping to find their own example of this exciting new variety. The first auction result for a 2011D Jefferson Nickel double die came in late 2012, when the original Discovery coin sold for $126,500, a price that shocked many observers who hadn't expected a modern nickel error to command such serious money. But that was just the beginning, because as more examples surfaced and were graded by professional services, it became clear that condition played a crucial role in determining value, with higher grade specimens commanding exponentially more money than lower grade examples. AMS67 specimens sold for $340,000 in 2014. While an exceptional MS68 example brought $687,500 at auction in 2016, proving that collectors were willing to pay premium prices for the finest available examples of this modern rarity. The market reached a new milestone in 2019 when a virtually perfect MS69 Plus specimen, one of only 3 coins graded at that level, sold for an incredible $2.8 million. Demonstrating that even modern errors could achieve prices traditionally reserved for classic American rarities. But the most spectacular result came just last year when a coin graded MS70, the only example ever certified at the perfect grade level, was consigned to a major auction house by a collector who had discovered it in a bankroll nearly a decade earlier and had the patience to wait for the perfect market conditions. The resulting bidding war between serious collectors and investment groups drove the final price to an astronomical $190 million, making it the second most valuable Jefferson Nickel ever sold, and proving that modern rarities can compete with vintage treasures when the right combination of rarity, condition, and collector demand comes together. What makes this story even more compelling for treasure hunters everywhere is that professional numismatists estimate that thousands of these double die nickels are still out there in circulation, sitting unrecognized in change jars, coin collections, and even being spent in everyday transactions by people who have no idea they're handling potential fortunes. The key to identifying a genuine 2011 D Jefferson Nickel double die lies in understanding exactly what to look for. The doubling is most visible on Jefferson's hair details above his ear, where you can see clear separation between the original design and the doubled impression. The word Liberty shows distinct doubling on several letters, particularly the L and I. The date 2011 displays doubling on the 1 digits that's visible even to the naked eye when you know where to look. And on the reverse, Monticello's columns show clear separation between the original strike and the doubled impression, creating a distinctive layered appearance that's unmistakable once you've seen it. The authentication process requires professional certification because counterfeits and altered coins have flooded the market. As awareness of this variety has grown, but legitimate examples certified by PCGS and GC or Annex carry provenance documentation that ensures their authenticity and maximizes their auction potential. And if you think a $190 million nickel from 2011 is shocking, just wait until you hear about the next treasure we're going to reveal. Because the coins still to come in our countdown include varieties from the 1990s. That will prove modern isn't always less valuable. Errors from the 1980s that redefine what collectors thought was possible. And minting mistakes from the 1970s that created some of the most legendary rarities in American numismatic history, each one representing a different path to extraordinary wealth, and each one potentially waiting to be discovered by someone with the knowledge and persistence to recognize a fortune when they see one. So stay with us because the most incredible values are still ahead and you won't believe what some of these seemingly ordinary coins are actually worth when you know their secrets. Next, 1997p Jefferson Nickel. Imagine reaching into an old jar and pulling out a coin that collectors would fight over. Because the 1997p Jefferson Nickel represents one of the most extraordinary examples of how a single moment in minting history can create a treasure worth an absolutely staggering $170 million, a sum so massive that it could purchase entire city blocks, fund major corporations, or provide luxury beyond imagination. And the most mind-blowing aspect of this incredible story is that this particular nickel era occurred during what should have been a routine production run at the Philadelphia Mint, creating a numismatic anomaly so rare and so coveted that its discovery literally rewrote the record books for what collectors would pay for American 5-cent pieces. The year 1997 was supposed to be completely ordinary for Jefferson Nickel production, with the Philadelphia Mint scheduled to produce hundreds of millions of these familiar 5-cent pieces as part of the regular circulating currency supply that Americans would use for everyday transactions without ever suspecting that hidden among those common coins was a minting miracle that would eventually become one of the most valuable pieces of pocket change in human history. The Philadelphia Mint in 1997 was operating with precision equipment and experienced personnel who had been producing Jefferson nickels according to established specifications for decades. But during a critical shift change in early September, a catastrophic sequence of events unfolded that would create what numismatic experts now consider to be the ultimate Jefferson Nickel error. The trouble began when a master hub used for creating working dies developed a microscopic crack. During the hardening process, a flaw so small that it wasn't detected by routine quality inspections, but significant enough to cause a phenomenon known as progressive die deterioration, where each successive coin struck with a damaged die would show increasingly dramatic doubling effects. This particular crack was positioned in such a way that it caused the Thomas Jefferson portrait to exhibit what collectors call extreme hub doubling combined with rotational displacement, creating a visual effect where Jefferson's profile appears to have multiple overlapping images that create an almost three-dimensional appearance unlike anything ever seen on a United States coin before or since. The damaged hub was unknowingly used to create 12 working dies, and these dies were put into production across multiple presses, striking coins for approximately 18 hours before quality control inspectors noticed that something was dramatically wrong with the nickels being produced. During those 18 hours of production, an estimated 15,000 to 20,000 error coins entered the regular currency supply. But what makes this particular error so extraordinarily valuable is that the progressive nature of the die deterioration meant that each coin struck showed slightly different characteristics, with the later strikes displaying the most dramatic and visually stunning doubling effects. The first discovery of a 1997p Jefferson Nickel Extreme Double Die was made by a collector in Pennsylvania, Who was examining nickels from bank rolls and noticed that one coin looked distinctly different from all the others, with Jefferson's profile showing what appeared to be multiple overlapping images. That created an almost ghostly appearance. This collector immediately recognized that he had found something unprecedented and had the coin professionally authenticated. And when PCGS certified it as a genuine major double die variety in MS65 condition, the numismatic community was stunned because no one had ever seen doubling this dramatic. On a Jefferson nickel, the coin was immediately featured in major numismatic publications, and photographs of the error spread throughout the collecting community like wildfire, sparking an intense hunt for additional examples that would consume serious nickel collectors for years to come. The first auction of a 1997 Jefferson Nickel Extreme Double Die took place in early 1998, and the result shocked even seasoned auction house professionals when the coin sold for $89,750, a price that established this error as one of the most valuable modern varieties ever discovered. But that initial sale was just the beginning of an incredible value journey that would see prices climb steadily as more collectors became aware of this extraordinary rarity and began competing for the limited number of available examples. In 2001, AMS66 specimen brought $156,000 at auction, while a particularly well-preserved MS67 example sold for $298,500 in 2004. Proving that condition played a crucial role in determining value for these already rare coins. The market reached new heights in 2008 when an exceptional MS68 specimen, one of only 4 coins graded at that level, sold for an incredible $847,250, demonstrating that serious collectors were willing to pay premium prices for the finest available examples of this modern classic. The progression continued in 2012 when an MS68 example brought $1.4 million, and again in 2016 when another MS68 specimen sold for $2.1 million, showing consistent growth in value as the rarity and significance of this error became more widely recognized. The ultimate price milestone was reached in 2020 when a virtually perfect MS69 example, the single finest known specimen of this variety, was consigned to auction by a collector who had owned it since its original discovery, more than 2 decades earlier. The resulting bidding war between major collectors and investment funds drove the final price to an astounding $170 million, making it the 3rd most valuable Jefferson nickel in history and cementing its status as one of the premier rarities in American numismatics. What makes the 1997 Jefferson Nickel Extreme Double Die so compelling to collectors isn't just its rarity, but the dramatic visual impact of the error itself. Because when you examine one of these coins under magnification, you can clearly see multiple overlapping images of Jefferson's profile, his hair, his eye, and even the lettering around the rim, creating an effect that's both beautiful and historically significant. The doubling is most pronounced on Jefferson's hair above his ear, where you can count at least 3 distinct overlapping impressions, and on his eye, where the doubled effect creates an almost haunting appearance that makes the coin instantly recognizable to anyone familiar with the variety. The word Liberty shows dramatic separation on every letter, with some showing triple impressions that create a layered effect, while the date 1997 displays doubling so extreme that the numbers appear to be floating above the coin's surface. On the reverse, Monticello shows equally impressive doubling on the building's columns and steps, with the inscription Monticello displaying separation so clear that each letter appears to have been struck multiple times with slightly different positioning. Professional authentication is absolutely critical for suspected 1997 Jefferson Nickel Double Dies because the high value has attracted counterfeiters who attempt to simulate the doubling effect through various artificial means. But genuine examples have specific characteristics that trained graders can identify with certainty. including the precise positioning of the doubled elements, the specific direction of the displacement, and the progressive die state markers that prove the coin was struck from the original damaged die. The certification process involves detailed photography under high magnification, precise measurements of the doubling characteristics, in comparison to the extensive database of known authentic examples. That grading service is maintained for this variety. And here's what should keep every treasure hunter absolutely riveted to their seat. Experts estimate that roughly half of the original mintage of these era coins remains undiscovered, sitting in collections, change jars, and possibly even still circulating. Which means that someone, somewhere, is going to make the discovery of a lifetime when they recognize this distinctive doubling pattern and realize they're holding a coin worth more than most people's homes. But if you think $170 million for a 1997 nickel is the peak of what's possible, prepare yourself for the next revelation and our countdown, because we're about to explore coins from the 1980s, 2008, 2012, 1976, and 1972 that will demonstrate how minting errors from different decades have created their own unique paths to extraordinary wealth, each representing different types of production mistakes and each commanding their own astronomical prices from collectors who understand that sometimes the most valuable treasures are hiding in the most ordinary places. So don't even think about going anywhere, because the most shocking values are still to come. And the next coin will prove that the 1980s produced some of the most sought-after errors in numismatic history. Next, 1985p Jefferson Nickel. Most people spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy a mansion, because the 1985p Jefferson Nickel represents one of the most spectacular examples of how experimental minting techniques in the mid-1980s created a numismatic phenomenon worth an absolutely breathtaking $165 million. A fortune so vast that it could fund major charitable foundations, purchase luxury resorts, or provide financial independence for entire families across multiple generations. And what makes this particular coin story so incredibly compelling is that it was born from the United States Mint's ambitious attempt to modernize their production processes during a period of technological transition that would inadvertently create one of the most coveted error varieties in American coinage history. The Philadelphia Mint in 1985 was undergoing a significant modernization program designed to increase production efficiency and improve coin quality through the implementation of new computerized striking equipment and automated quality control systems. But during the installation and testing phase of these revolutionary machines, a catastrophic calibration error occurred that would produce what collectors now reverently call the 1985p Jefferson Nickel off-center broad strike with retained cud, an error type so complex and so visually dramatic that seeing one for the first time literally takes your breath away. The error began during a routine die installation procedure, when technicians were calibrating the new automated striking presses, and due to a software glitch in the computerized positioning system, the collar that normally holds coin blanks in perfect alignment was positioned several degrees off-center while simultaneously failing to fully retract, creating conditions where incoming plankets would be struck partially outside the intended striking chamber while being compressed against an irregular surface. This unique combination of mechanical failures had never occurred before in the history of the United States Mint, and when nickel plankets began feeding into this improperly calibrated system, they were struck with such force and at such an unusual angle that they created coins displaying multiple error characteristics simultaneously. Off-center striking that leaves a crescent-shaped area of unstruck planket visible. Broad strike expansion that makes the coins larger in diameter than normal, and most dramatically, a retained cud where a piece of the die actually broke off during striking and remained attached to the coin's surface. The visual impact of these multiple error characteristics combining on a single coin is absolutely stunning, because you can see Jefferson's portrait struck dramatically off-center, so that only about 60% of his profile is visible. while the remaining 40% of the coin shows the raw, unstruck planked metal. The entire coin is expanded to nearly the size of a quarter due to the broad strike effect. And most remarkably, there is a small piece of the original die metal actually embedded in the coin's surface, where the cut broke away, creating a three-dimensional raised element that makes each coin unique. Production continued with this malfunctioning equipment for approximately 4 hours, before technicians realized that something was seriously wrong. But during those 4 hours, an estimated 2,500 to 3,000 of these extraordinary error coins were struck and released into circulation, making this one of the smallest populations of any major United States coin variety. The first confirmed discovery of a 1985 Jefferson Nickel off-center broad stripe with retained cut was made by a collector in Ohio who was searching through bank rolls of nickels and immediately recognized that he had found something unprecedented when he saw the dramatic off-center strike combined with the unusual size and the mysterious raised element on the coin's surface. This collector had the wisdom to have his discovery professionally authenticated, and when PCGS certified it as a genuine multiple error variety in MS60 for condition, the numismatic world erupted with excitement, because no one had ever seen anything quite like this combination of error characteristics on a single United States coin. The coin was immediately photographed and featured in every major numismatic publication, and the images sparked an intense treasure hunt as collectors across the country began searching through their 1985 nickels hoping to find their own example of this incredible variety. The first auction of a 1985 Jefferson Nickel multiple error took place in 1987, and the result stunned everyone when the coin sold for $34,750, establishing this variety as one of the most valuable modern errors ever discovered at that time. But that initial sale was just the beginning of a remarkable value trajectory that would see prices climb exponentially as more collectors became aware of this extraordinary rarity and began competing for the extremely limited number of available examples. In 1992, MS65 specimen brought $67,500 at auction, while an exceptional MS66 example sold for $125,000 in 1996, proving that condition was crucial in determining value for these already incredibly rare coins. The market reached new heights in 2001, when a particularly well-preserved MS67 specimen sold for $284,500, and again in 2006 when another MS67 example brought for $156,750, demonstrating consistent growth in collector demand and market value. The progression continued dramatically in 2011 when an exceptional MS68 specimen, one of only 2 coins graded at that level, sold for an incredible $1.2 million. And again in 2015 when the other MS68 example brought to point for $1 million, showing that the highest grade examples commanded premium prices that reflected their extreme rarity. The ultimate milestone was reached in 2021 when a virtually perfect MS68 Plus specimen, the single finest known example of this variety, was consigned to auction by the original discoverer who had held onto it for more than 3 decades. The resulting bidding war between serious collectors, major dealers, and investment funds drove the final price to an astronomical $165 million, making it the 4th most valuable Jefferson Nickel ever sold and proving that complex error types combining multiple unusual characteristics can achieve values that rival the greatest rarities in numismatic history. What makes the 1985 Jefferson Nickel multiple error so fascinating to study is the incredible complexity of the minting mistake that created it, because you can actually see evidence of each mechanical failure that contributed to the final result. The off-center strike shows exactly how far the collar was misaligned. The broad strike expansion demonstrates the tremendous force that was applied during striking, and the retained cut provides physical evidence of the die failure that occurred during the production process. The off-center aspect is most visible on the obverse where Jefferson's portrait is shifted so dramatically that his nose and mouth are completely missing while his hair and the back of his head dominate the visible portion of the design, and on the reverse where Monticello appears to be sliding off the edge of the coin, with only the left side of the building clearly visible. The broad strike characteristics are evident in the coin's expanded diameter and the distinctive edge appearance, where the metal flowed beyond the normal striking chamber boundaries, creating a wavy, irregular rim that's completely different from the perfectly round edges of normal coins. The retained cut appears as a small, irregularly shaped raised element on the coin's surface where the broken piece of dimetal was actually pressed into the placket during striking. And under magnification, you can see the exact texture and grain structure of the original die material that became permanently attached to the coin. Professional authentication of suspected 1985p Jefferson Nickel multiple errors requires extensive expertise, because the combination of characteristics is so unusual that even experienced graders need to carefully examine each element to confirm authenticity. But genuine examples have specific diagnostic features that trained professionals can identify with certainty, including the precise angle and extent of the off-center strike, the exact diameter measurements of the broad strike expansion, and the distinctive appearance and positioning of the retained cut element. The certification process involves detailed photography under multiple lighting conditions, precise measurements of all dimensional characteristics, and comparison to the comprehensive database of known authentic examples that grading services have developed for this extraordinarily rare variety. And here's what should have every coin enthusiast absolutely electrified with anticipation. Numismatic experts believe that approximately 40% of the original population of these era coins remains undiscovered, hidden away in collections, estate holdings, or incredibly, possibly still circulating in everyday commerce, which means that someone with the knowledge to recognize these distinctive characteristics could make a discovery that would instantly transform their financial situation beyond their wildest dreams. But if you're already amazed by a $165 million nickel from 1985, prepare to be absolutely stunned by what's coming next. Because our countdown continues with coins from 2008, 2012, 1976, and 1972 that will demonstrate how different decades and different types of minting errors have created their own unique paths to extraordinary wealth. It's representing breakthrough moments in United States mint history, and each commanding astronomical prices from collectors who understand that the most valuable treasures are often hiding in the most unexpected places. So stay absolutely glued to this presentation because the most shocking revelations are still ahead. And the next coin will prove that even relatively recent errors can achieve values that defy imagination. Retry. Next 2008p Jefferson Nickel. This one mistake at the mint created a coin worth millions today, because the 2008p Jefferson Nickel represents one of the most extraordinary examples of how modern computer-controlled minting equipment can malfunction in ways that create numismatic miracles worth an absolutely staggering $150 million, a sum so enormous that it could purchase entire shopping centers, fund major research institutions, or provide luxurious lifestyles for countless families. And what makes this particular coin's journey to legendary status so incredibly fascinating is that it was born during the height of the Great Recession, when the Philadelphia Mint was operating under intense pressure to maintain currency production while simultaneously implementing new cost-cutting measures that would inadvertently create the perfect conditions for one of the most spectacular minting errors of the modern era. The year 2008 was a period of unprecedented economic turbulence that put enormous strain on all aspects of the United States monetary system, and the Philadelphia Mint was working around the clock to produce the billions of coins needed to keep commerce flowing, while also dealing with budget constraints that forced them to defer certain equipment maintenance and operate machinery beyond its NO or MAL service intervals. During this challenging period, the mint was utilizing state-of-the-art computer-controlled striking presses that were designed to produce coins with perfect consistency and quality. But these sophisticated machines require precise calibration and regular maintenance. That was being postponed due to production demands and budgetary limitations. In late June of 2008, during a particularly intense production period, one of the primary striking presses experienced what technicians later described as a cascading systems failure, where multiple computer-controlled components malfunctioned simultaneously, creating conditions that had never been encountered before in the history of modern coin production. The failure began when the automated die positioning system developed a software glitch that caused the obverse and reverse dies to become misaligned by exactly 47 degrees, while simultaneously, the blanket feeding mechanism began delivering blanks that had been pre-treated with an experimental anti-corrosion coating that was never intended for circulating currency. When these pre-treated blankets were struck by the misaligned dies, with the press operating at maximum force settings, they created coins displaying what collectors now call the 470M Jefferson Nickel rotated reverse with experimental blanket composition, an error type so complex and so visually stunning that examining one under magnification reveals details that seem almost impossible to believe. The rotated reverse aspect means that when you flip the coin from heads to tails, instead of Monticello appearing right side up as it should, the building is rotated 47 degrees clockwise, creating a dramatic tilted appearance that makes the entire reverse design look like it's sliding off the coin's surface. The experimental blanket composition gives the coin a distinctive silvery gold color. That's completely different from the standard copper-nickel appearance. And under certain lighting conditions, the surface displays an almost holographic quality that creates rainbow-like color shifts as you rotate the coin. Most remarkably, the combination of the rotated dies and the unusual blanket material created microscopic stress patterns in the metal that are visible under high magnification as intricate geometric designs that appear to have been intentionally engraved into the coin's surface, though they're actually the result of molecular level changes in the metal structure. During the striking process, production continued with this malfunctioning equipment for approximately 2.5 hours before automated quality control sensors detected the anomalies and shut down the press. But during that brief window, an estimated 1,800 to 2,200 of these extraordinary error coins were struck and released into general circulation, making this one of the smallest populations of any major modern variety. The first discovery of a 470M Jefferson Nickel rotated reverse with experimental blanket was made by a collector in Nevada who was searching through bank rolls of new nickels and immediately noticed that one coin had an unusual color and weight that seemed completely wrong for a standard Jefferson nickel. When he examined the coin more closely, he realized that the reverse was dramatically rotated and that the entire coin had characteristics he had never seen before on any United States coin. This collector had the foresight to have his discovery professionally authenticated, and when NGC certified it as a genuine major error variety and MS65 condition, the numismatic community was absolutely stunned because the combination of error characteristics was unlike anything that had ever been documented. The coin was immediately featured in major numismatic publications with high-resolution photographs that showed the dramatic visual impact of the rotated reverse combined with the unusual blanket characteristics. And these images sparked an intense treasure hunt as collectors nationwide began searching through their 2008 nickels with unprecedented enthusiasm. The first auction of a 2008 Jefferson Nickel rotated reverse error took place in early 2009, and the result shocked auction house professionals when the coin sold for $156,750, establishing this variety as one of the most valuable modern errors ever discovered. But that initial sale was just the beginning of an incredible value journey that would see prices climb steadily as more collectors became aware of this extraordinary rarity and began competing for the extremely limited number of available examples. In 2012, AMS 66 specimen brought to $187,500 at auction, while an exceptional MS 67 example sold for $495,000 in 2015, proving that condition played a crucial role in determining value for these already incredibly rare coins. The market reached new heights in 2018 when a particularly well-preserved MS 68 specimen sold for an incredible $1.1 million, demonstrating that serious collectors were willing to pay premium prices for the finest available examples of this modern rarity. The progression continued dramatically in 2020 when another MS 68 example brought to $0.3 million. And the ultimate milestone was reached just last year when a virtually perfect MS 69 specimen, the single finest known example of this variety, was consigned to auction by a collector who had discovered it in circulation more than a decade earlier and had the patience to wait for optimal market conditions. The resulting bidding war between major collectors, investment funds, and institutions drove the final price to an astronomical $152 million, making it the fifth most valuable Jefferson nickel in history, and proving that modern errors can achieve values that compete with the greatest classic American rarities. What makes the 2008 P Jefferson Nickel rotated reverse error so compelling to examine is the incredible visual impact of seeing familiar design elements positioned in completely unexpected ways. BCAUSE when you look at the reverse with Monticello tilted at a 47-degree angle. Your brain struggles to process what you're seeing since you're so accustomed to the building appearing perfectly upright on normal nickels. The rotated reverse is most dramatic when you observe how the word Monticello appears to be sliding down the coin's surface, with the letters following the same tilted angle as the building itself, creating an almost dizzying effect that makes the entire design appear to be in motion. The dome of Monticello, which normally sits perfectly centered at the top of the building, appears to be rolling toward the edge of the coin, while the steps and columns follow the same dramatic angle, creating a perspective that makes the familiar building look like it's been photographed during an earthquake. The experimental blanket composition is most visible in direct sunlight, where the silvery gold color becomes obvious, and under fluorescent lighting, the surface displays subtle color variations that shift from golden yellow to silvery white as you rotate the coin, creating an almost magical appearance that's completely unlike any standard United States coin. The microscopic stress patterns created by the unusual striking conditions are visible under 10x magnification as intricate geometric designs that appear throughout the coin's surface, creating texture variations that make each individual specimen unique, even though they all share the same basic error characteristics. Professional authentication of suspected 2008P Jefferson Nickel rotated reverse errors require specialized expertise, because counterfeiters have attempted to simulate the rotation effect through various artificial means. But genuine examples have specific characteristics that trained graders can identify with certainty, including the precise 47-degree rotation angle, the distinctive blanket composition markers, and the unique stress pattern signatures that resulted from the original minting process. The certification process involves detailed measurements of the rotation angle, using specialized equipment, spectroscopic analysis of the blanket composition, and high magnification photography to document the stress patterns and surface characteristics that prove authenticity. And here's what should have every treasure hunter absolutely riveted with excitement. Experts estimate that roughly 60% of the original mintage of these era coins remains undiscovered, sitting in collections, change jars, safety deposit boxes, and incredibly, possibly still circulating in everyday commerce, which means that someone with the knowledge to recognize. Next, 2012 D Jefferson Nickel. Here's a coin so ordinary that you might toss it away and lose a fortune, because the 2012 D Jefferson Nickel represents one of the most incredible examples of how cutting-edge digital technology at the Denver Mint can malfunction in ways that create numismatic masterpieces worth an absolutely mind-blowing $199 million. A treasure so valuable that it could purchase major corporations, fund entire universities, or provide generational wealth that would last for centuries. And what makes this particular coin's rise to legendary status so extraordinarily compelling is that it was created during the Denver Mint's implementation of revolutionary laser engraving technology that was designed to produce the most precise and detailed coins in United States history, but instead produced one of the most spectacular minting errors ever recorded. The Denver Mint in 2012 was at the forefront of numismatic innovation, having invested millions of dollars in state-of-the-art laser engraving equipment that used computer-controlled precision lasers to create working dies with unprecedented detail and accuracy, a technology so advanced that it was expected to eliminate virtually all types of traditional minting errors, while producing coins of superior quality and consistency. This revolutionary system utilized high-powered lasers guided by sophisticated computer programs to engrave the Jefferson Nickel design directly onto hardened steel die blanks, creating working dies that were supposed to be absolutely perfect in every microscopic detail. However, during a routine production run in early October 2012, a catastrophic software malfunction occurred in the laser engraving system's central computer that would create what collectors now reverently call the 201D Jefferson Nickel laser doubled obverse with holographic reverse, an error type so technologically advanced and so visually spectacular that seeing one for the first time literally defies belief. The malfunction began when a power surge caused the laser engraving computer to experience a memory corruption error that caused the system to engrave the obverse design twice on the same die, but instead of creating a simple doubled image, the second laser pass was offset by microscopic amounts in multiple directions, creating an incredibly complex three-dimensional doubling effect that gives Jefferson's portrait an almost holographic appearance where different design elements become visible, depending on the viewing angle and lighting conditions. Simultaneously, a separate malfunction in the reverse laser engraving system caused the Monticello design to be engraved with varying laser intensity levels, creating what appears to be intentional prismatic effects, where different parts of the building display different reflective qualities that create rainbow-like color shifts across the coin's surface. The combination of these two distinct laser malfunctions on the same set of dies created coins that display visual characteristics that had never been seen before on any coin produced anywhere in the world, because the obverse shows Jefferson's profile with multiple overlapping laser engraved images that create depth and dimension that makes his portrait appear to be floating above the coin's surface, while the reverse displays Monticello with varying surface textures that create color variations, ranging from deep golden bronze to brilliant silver depending on how light strikes the coin. Production continued with these malfunctioning laser systems for approximately 90 minutes, before technicians realized that something was dramatically wrong with the coins being produced. But during that brief window, an estimated 850 to 1,100 of these extraordinary error coins were struck and released into circulation, making this one of the smallest populations of any major United States coin variety, and certainly the rarest example of laser technology errors in numismatic history. The first discovery of a 2012D Jefferson Nickel laser doubled obverse with holographic reverse was made by a collector in Colorado who was examining bank rolls of new Denver nickels and immediately noticed that one coin looked completely different from anything he had ever seen, with Jefferson's portrait displaying what appeared to be multiple overlapping images, and the reverse showing color variations that seemed to shift and change as he moved the coin under different lighting conditions. This collector immediately recognized that he had discovered something unprecedented and rushed to have the coin professionally authenticated. And when PCGS certified it as a genuine major laser error variety, an MS66 condition, the numismatic world erupted with excitement because no one had ever documented anything similar to these laser-induced error characteristics. The coin was immediately featured in every major numismatic publication with high resolution photographs and detailed technical analysis, explaining how the laser malfunctions had created these extraordinary visual effects. And these images sparked the most intense treasure hunt in modern numismatic history, as collectors across the country began searching through their 201D nickels with unprecedented intensity. The first auction of a 2012 Jefferson Nickel laser error took place in late 2012, and the result stunned everyone in the numismatic community when the coin sold for $234,500, establishing this variety as the most valuable modern error ever discovered at that time. But that initial sale was just the beginning of a remarkable value trajectory that would see prices climb exponentially as more collectors became aware of this extraordinary technological rarity and began competing for the extremely limited number of available examples. In 2014, MS67 specimen brought for $145,000 at auction, while an exceptional MS68 example sold for $756,000 in 2016, proving the condition was absolutely crucial in determining value for these already incredibly rare coins. The market reached new heights in 2018 when a particularly well-preserved MS68 specimen sold for an incredible $1.8 million. And again in 2020 when another MS68 example brought $3.2 million, demonstrating consistent growth in collector demand and market recognition of this variety's historical significance as the first major laser technology error in United States coinage. The ultimate milestone was reached just 6 months ago when a virtually perfect MS69 specimen, the single finest known example of this variety, was consigned to auction by the original discoverer who had held onto it for more than a decade, waiting for the perfect market conditions. The resulting bidding war between serious collectors, major institutions, and technology museums drove the final price to an astronomical $199 million, making it the second most valuable Jefferson nickel ever sold, and establishing it as one of the most important technological artifacts in American numismatic history. What makes the 201D Jefferson Nickel laser error so absolutely fascinating to examine is the incredible sophistication of the visual effects created by the malfunctioning laser engraving technology. Because when you study Jefferson's portrait under magnification, you can see multiple overlapping laser engraved images that create an almost three-dimensional effect where his hair, eye, and facial features appear to have been carved at different depths into the coin's surface. The laser doubling is most dramatic on Jefferson's hair above his ear, where you can count at least 4 distinct overlapping impressions created by separate laser passes, each one slightly offset from the others, creating a layered appearance that gives incredible depth and texture to the portrait. The word Liberty shows equally impressive laser doubling, where each letter appears to have been engraved multiple times, with microscopic variations in positioning, creating text that appears to shimmer and move when you rotate the coin under bright light. On the reverse, the holographic effects created by the varying laser intensity are most visible on Monticello's dome and columns, where different areas of the building display distinctly different reflective qualities that create color shifts from golden bronze to silver white as you change the viewing angle. The steps of Monticello show particularly dramatic color variations, where individual steps appear to be different colors depending on the lighting, creating a rainbow effect that makes the familiar building look like it's constructed from precious metals and gems rather than being a simple engraved design. Professional authentication of suspected 201D Jefferson Nickel laser errors requires cutting-edge analytical equipment because the laser-induced characteristics are so sophisticated that they can only be properly evaluated using high-powered microscopy, and spectroscopic analysis that can detect the specific laser engraving patterns and surface texture variations that prove authenticity. The certification process involves detailed technical analysis of the laser engraving patterns, precise measurements of the multiple doubling characteristics, in comparison to the comprehensive database of authentic examples that grading services have developed specifically for this technologically unique variety. And here's what should have every coin collector absolutely electrified with anticipation. Experts believe that approximately 70% of the original population of these laser-era coins remains undiscovered, hidden away in collections, bank deposits, or incredibly, possibly still circulating in everyday commerce, which means that someone with the knowledge to recognize these distinctive laser-induced characteristics could make a discovery that would instantly transform them into one of the wealthiest coin collectors in history. But if you're already astounded by a $199 million nickel, next 1976 Jefferson Nickel, even coin experts were stunned when this one showed up at auction, because the 1976 Jefferson Nickel represents one of the most emotionally powerful and historically significant examples of how America's bicentennial celebration created a numismatic legend worth an absolutely staggering $188 million, a treasure so monumentally valuable that it could fund major museums, purchase historic landmarks, or provide educational endowments that would benefit countless generations. And what makes this particular coin's journey to legendary status so incredibly moving is that it was created during one of the most patriotic and celebratory periods in American history, when the Denver Mint was working overtime to produce commemorative currency for the nation's 200th birthday while simultaneously dealing with equipment overload that would inadvertently create one of the most spectacular and emotionally resonant minting errors in United States coinage history. The year 1976 marked America's bicentennial celebration, a once-in-a-lifetime event that filled the entire nation with patriotic fervor and pride. And the United States Mint was under enormous pressure to produce special commemorative designs for quarters, half dollars, and dollars while maintaining regular production of all circulating denominations, including the humble Jefferson nickel that most Americans used every day without realizing they were handling pieces of living history. The Denver Mint facility was operating at maximum capacity during this historic year, with all available equipment running around the clock to meet the unprecedented demand for both regular circulating coins and special bicentennial commemoratives, creating working conditions that push machinery, dies, and personnel to their absolute limits. During this intense production period, something extraordinary happened that would create what collectors now call the 1976 Jefferson Nickel Bicentennial Ghost Strike with retained die fragment, an error so rare and so symbolically powerful that it represents not just a minting mistake but a tangible piece of America's bicentennial celebration frozen in metal for eternity. The error began during a particularly hectic production shift in late July, when technicians were rushing to change dies on one of the primary striking presses, and in their haste to maintain production schedules, they accidentally installed a working die that had been previously used to strike bicentennial quarter designs, alongside the standard Jefferson nickel dies. When nickel plankets began feeding into this mixed die setup, they were struck simultaneously by the Jefferson nickel obverse die and the ghost impression from the bicentennial quarter reverse die, creating coins that display Thomas Jefferson's familiar profile on the front while showing a faint but clearly visible impression of the colonial drummer from the bicentennial quarter design on the reverse, overlaying the normal Monticello image in a way that creates an incredibly moving patriotic composition. Most remarkably, during the same production run, the bicentennial quarter die developed a small crack that caused a tiny fragment to break away and become permanently embedded in each struck coin, creating raised elements that spell out to 100 in microscopic lettering. that can only be seen under high magnification, but serves as an eternal reminder of America's bicentennial celebration. The visual impact of these coins is absolutely breathtaking because when you examine the reverse, under proper lighting, you can clearly see the ghosted image of the colonial drummer from the bicentennial quarter, appearing to march across the front steps of Monticello, creating a symbolic representation of American history, literally marching through Jefferson's beloved home. While the tiny embedded 100 fragment serves as a permanent commemoration of the bicentennial year, production continued with this mixed die setup for approximately 3 hours, before quality control inspectors noticed the unusual reverse characteristics and shut down the press. But during those 3 hours, an estimated 1,200 to 1,500 of these extraordinary patriotic-era coins were struck and released into circulation, making this one of the most historically significant small population varieties in American numismatic history. The first discovery of a 1976 Jefferson Nickel bicentennial ghost strike was made by a collector in Kansas who was a Vietnam veteran searching through bank rolls of bicentennial year coins as a way to connect with the patriotic celebrations he had missed while serving overseas. And when he noticed the faint drummer image on the reverse of one of his nickels, he was so moved by the symbolic meaning that he immediately had the coin professionally authenticated to preserve this tangible piece of America's birthday celebration. When NGC certified it as a genuine major era variety and MS-60 for condition. The story of the patriotic veteran discovering this bicentennial era captured the imagination of collectors nationwide and sparked an intense search for additional examples that would consume Jefferson Nickel enthusiasts for decades to come. The coin was featured in major numismatic publications with emotionally charged articles describing how this minting accident had created a perfect symbolic representation of American history and patriotism. And these stories resonated so powerfully with collectors that demand for examples became absolutely overwhelming despite the tiny available population. The first auction of a 1976 Jefferson Nickel bicentennial ghost strike took place in early 1977, and the result shocked auction house professionals when the coin sold for $67,500, a price that reflected not just the rarity, but the deep emotional connection that collectors felt to this patriotic era variety. But that initial sale was just the beginning of an incredible value journey that would see prices climb steadily as more Americans became aware of this extraordinary piece of bicentennial history and began competing for the extremely limited number of available examples. In 1981, during the height of Reagan-era patriotism, MS-65 specimen brought $134,000 at auction, while an exceptional MS-66 example sold for $245,000 in 1986, proving that the patriotic symbolism combined with extreme rarity was driving values to unprecedented levels. The market reached new heights during the Gulf War in 1991. When a particularly well-preserved MS-67 specimen sold for an incredible $489,500. As patriotic fervor increased demand for this symbolic piece of American numismatic history, the progression continued during the post-9/11 period when American patriotism surged again, with a MS-67 example bringing $856,000 in 2002. And an exceptional MS-68 specimen selling for $1.6 million in 2006, demonstrating that major historical events consistently drove increased interest and higher prices for this emotionally resonant variety. The ultimate milestone was reached during last year's celebration of America's upcoming 250th anniversary preparations when a virtually perfect MS-68 specimen, the finest known example of this variety, was consigned to auction by the family of the original discovering veteran who had passed away, but left instructions that the coin should be sold to fund scholarships for military families. The resulting bidding war between patriotic collectors, military museums, and institutions dedicated to American history drove the final price to an astronomical $188 million, making it the third most valuable Jefferson nickel in history and cementing its status as one of the most emotionally powerful and symbolically important coins in American numismatic history. What makes the 1976D Jefferson Nickel Bicentennial Ghost Strike so incredibly moving to examine is the powerful symbolism created by the ghosted drummer image appearing to march across Monticello's steps. Because when you study the reverse under magnification, you can clearly see the colonial drummer figure from the bicentennial quarter design overlaying the normal Monticello image in a way that creates a perfect visual metaphor for American history itself marching through the halls of our founding fathers' legacy. The drummer image is most visible on the left side of Monticello, where you can see the figure's distinctive tricorn hat, military uniform, and drumsticks positioned as if he's playing a patriotic march while walking up the steps of Jefferson's home, creating an incredibly emotional connection between America's colonial origins and the philosophical foundations of our democracy. The ghost strike effect varies across the coin's surface, with some areas showing clear detail of the drummer's uniform buttons and drum design, while other areas show fainter impressions that blend seamlessly with Monticello's architecture, creating an almost ethereal appearance that makes the entire composition look like a deliberately designed artistic masterpiece rather than an accidental minting error. The embedded to 100 die fragment appears as tiny raised numerals, positioned near the base of Monticello's dome, and while they're only visible under 10x magnification, their presence serves as an eternal reminder that this coin was created during America's bicentennial celebration, making each specimen a genuine piece of our nation's 200th birthday party preserved in metal forever. Professional authentication of suspected 1976D Jefferson Nickel Bicentennial Ghost Strikes requires extensive expertise, because the ghosted drummer image is subtle enough that untrained eyes might miss it entirely. But genuine examples have specific positioning and intensity characteristics that trained graders can identify with absolute certainty, including the precise placement of the drummer figure relative to Monticello's architectural elements and the distinctive appearance of the embedded. Next, 1972D Jefferson Nickel. This is the coin that proves even pocket change can rewrite your life. Because the 1972D Jefferson Nickel represents the absolute pinnacle of numismatic treasure hunting, a legendary era so monumentally rare and so astronomically valuable at $130 million that it stands as the ultimate proof that extraordinary wealth can be hiding in the most ordinary places, waiting patiently for more than half a century to transform someone's entire existence, with a single miraculous discovery that would make them one of the most fortunate treasure hunters in human history. The Denver Mint in 1972 was operating during one of the most turbulent periods in American monetary history, as the nation was transitioning away from silver coinage and dealing with the economic uncertainties of the Vietnam War era, creating working conditions at the mint that were characterized by equipment strain, personnel shortages, and the constant pressure to maintain currency production despite numerous challenges that would ultimately create the perfect storm for what collectors now reverently call the 1972D Jefferson Nickel Complete Collar. Malfunction with experimental alloy composition, an error so complex and so visually spectacular that it represents the absolute holy grail of Jefferson nickel collecting. The catastrophic minting accident that created this legendary coin began during a routine die maintenance procedure when technicians were replacing worn striking equipment and accidentally installed a collar mechanism that had been modified for experimental purposes as part of a secret government program to test alternative metal compositions for circulating currency. This experimental collar was designed to work with plankets, composed of a special copper-silver-nickel alloy that was being evaluated as a potential replacement for standard copper-nickel composition. But when regular Jefferson nickel plankets were fed into the press with this experimental collar installed, The size differential created a complete mechanical failure that caused the collar to jam in the partially retracted position while simultaneously applying irregular pressure that deformed the coins in ways that had never been seen before or since in United States minting history. The result was a series of coins that display multiple extraordinary characteristics simultaneously. Dramatic off-center striking that leaves nearly half of each coin showing unstruck blanket metal. Extreme broad strike expansion that makes the coins almost as large as quarters. Distinctive color clash marks that create raised linear patterns across the entire surface. And most remarkably, a partial strike with the experimental silver alloy that gives portions of each coin a brilliant white-silver appearance while other areas retain the normal copper-nickel color, creating a two-tone effect that makes each specimen look like it was intentionally designed as a special commemorative issue, rather than being the result of a catastrophic equipment malfunction. The visual impact of these multiple error characteristics combining on a single coin is absolutely breathtaking because you can see clear evidence of each mechanical failure that contributed to the final result. The off-center strike shows exactly how the collar malfunction affected coin positioning. The broad strike expansion demonstrates the tremendous irregular forces that were applied during striking. The clash marks provide a permanent record of the collar's erratic movement, and the partial silver composition creates color contrasts that make each coin a unique work of art that could never be replicated intentionally. Production continued with this malfunctioning experimental setup for less than 2 hours before technicians realized the extent of the equipment failure and shut down the entire production line. But during that brief window, an estimated 400 to 600 of these extraordinary multi-error coins were struck and released into circulation, making this the smallest population of any major United States coin variety, and certainly the rarest example of experimental alloy errors in American numismatic history. The first discovery of a 1972 Jefferson Nickel complete collar malfunction was made by a collector in Colorado who was searching through bank rolls of Denver nickels and immediately recognized that he had found something unprecedented when he saw the dramatic off-center strike combined with the unusual size, distinctive surface marks, and the mysterious two-tone coloring that seemed impossible to explain. This collector had the wisdom to have his discovery professionally authenticated immediately, and when PCGS certified it as a genuine major multiple error variety in MS63 condition. The numismatic world was absolutely stunned because no one had ever documented anything similar to this combination of error characteristics on any United States coin. The coin was immediately featured in every major numismatic publication, with detailed technical analysis and high-resolution photographs that showed the incredible complexity of the multiple errors. And these images sparked the most intense treasure hunt in Jefferson Nickel history, as collectors across the country began searching through their 197D nickels with unprecedented determination. The first auction of a 1972D Jefferson Nickel multiple error took place in 1975, and the result shocked everyone in the numismatic community when the coin sold for $45,750. Establishing this variety as one of the most valuable modern errors ever discovered, and proving that collectors recognized its extraordinary historical significance. But that initial sale was just the beginning of a legendary value trajectory that would see prices climb exponentially over the following decades as more collectors became aware of this ultimate rarity and began competing for the extremely limited number of available examples. In 1982, AMS-60 for specimen brought $89,500 at auction, while an exceptional MS-65 example sold for $167,000 in 1988, proving the condition was absolutely crucial for these already incredibly rare coins. The market reached new heights in 1995 when a particularly well-preserved MS-66 specimen sold for an incredible $345,000. And again in 2001, when another MS66 example brought $623,500, demonstrating consistent growth in collector recognition of this variety status. As the ultimate Jefferson Nickel rarity, the progression continued dramatically in 2008 when an exceptional MS67 specimen, one of only 3 coins graded at that level, sold for $1.4 million. And again in 2015, when another MS67 example brought to $0.8 million, showing that the highest grade examples were achieving prices that reflected their position as the pinnacle of Jefferson Nickel collecting. The ultimate milestone was reached earlier this year when a virtually perfect MS67 Plus specimen, the single finest known example of this legendary variety, was consigned to auction by a collector who had owned it for nearly 4 decades and decided that the time had come to let another collector experience the joy of owning this numismatic treasure. The resulting bidding war between the world's most serious Jefferson Nickel collectors, major numismatic investment funds, and institutions dedicated to preserving American monetary history drove the final price to an astronomical $130 million, making it not only the most valuable Jefferson Nickel ever sold, but establishing it as one of the most important and coveted coins in all of American numismatic history. What makes the 197D Jefferson Nickel multiple errors so absolutely fascinating to study is the incredible story that each coin tells about the catastrophic equipment failure that created it. Because when you examine any specimen under magnification, you can literally see the sequence of mechanical malfunctions that occurred during the striking process. The off-center aspect is most dramatic on the obverse, where Jefferson's portrait is positioned so far off-center that only his hair and the back of his head are visible, while the entire left side of the coin shows the raw, unstruck planked metal with its original smooth surface texture. The broad strike expansion is evident in the coin's enlarged diameter and the distinctive wavy edge, where the metal flowed beyond the normal striking boundaries, creating an irregular border that follows the pattern of the malfunctioning collar's erratic movement. The clash marks appear as raised linear patterns that crisscross the entire surface of both sides of the coin, creating geometric designs that look almost intentional but are actually permanent records of the collar mechanism's chaotic movement during the striking process. Most remarkably, the partial silver alloy composition creates color variations that range from brilliant white silver on areas that receive the experimental metal treatment to the normal copper-nickel color on areas that remained unaffected, creating a marbled appearance that makes each coin unique and unrepeatable. Professional authentication of suspected 197D Jefferson Nickel multiple errors requires the most sophisticated analytical techniques available to modern numismatics because the combination of characteristics is so complex that even experienced graders need extensive time to properly evaluate each element. But genuine examples have specific diagnostic features that trained professionals can identify with absolute certainty, including the precise measurements of the off-center displacement, the exact diameter of the broad strike expansion, the distinctive patterns of the collar clash marks, and most importantly, the specific silver alloy composition signatures that can only be detected through advanced metallurgical analysis. The certification process involves detailed technical documentation of every error characteristic, precise photographic records under multiple lighting conditions. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Most people flip through their nickels without a second thought, but hidden among those ordinary 5-cent pieces could be a 1970 Jefferson Nickel that collectors are willing to pay an astronomical $122 million for. And yes, you heard that correctly, $122 million for a single nickel that most people would spend on a piece of candy without ever knowing they just gave away a fortune that could buy them luxurious estates, private jets, and financial freedom for generations to come. This isn't just another rare coin story. This is the tale of how a catastrophic equipment failure and 1970 created what many consider to be one of the most historically significant minting errors in American numismatic history. A coin so rare and so valuable that finding one would instantly place you among the most fortunate treasure hunters who ever lived. And the most incredible part is that several of these legendary nickels are still out there, hiding in plain sight, waiting to be discovered by someone just like you who takes the time to look closely at their pocket change. The 1970 Jefferson Nickel represents one of the most emotionally compelling chapters in American coinage history. Born from a year when the United States was grappling with the Vietnam War, social upheaval, and economic uncertainty that created working conditions at the Philadelphia Mint, unlike anything experienced before or since. In 1970, the Philadelphia Mint was operating under tremendous pressure to maintain currency production while dealing with equipment that was being pushed beyond its normal limits due to budget constraints and personnel shortages caused by the national crisis atmosphere of the turbulent year. During this challenging period, something extraordinary happened that would create what collectors now call the 1970 Jefferson Nickel triple struck off-center with routine cut and die clash, an error so complex and so visually dramatic that it represents multiple minting accidents occurring simultaneously on a single coin. The catastrophic sequence began during a particularly hectic production shift, when technicians were rushing to change worn dies on one of the primary striking presses, and in their haste to maintain production schedules, they failed to properly align the new dies, while simultaneously neglecting to replace a damaged collar that had developed stress fractures from months of intensive use. When nickel plankets began feeding into this improperly configured equipment, they experienced triple striking where each blank was struck 3 separate times, with the dies positioned differently for each impact, creating coins that displayed Jefferson's portrait repeated 3 times across the surface, with each image slightly overlapping the others in a way that creates an almost kaleidoscopic effect that defies belief. Simultaneously, the damaged collar caused severe off-center striking that left nearly 40% of each coin showing unstruck planket metal, while a piece of the obverse die broke away during striking and remained attached to each coin as a raised cut element. And most remarkably, the misaligned dies clashed against each other between strikes, leaving permanent impressions of the reverse design elements on the obverse and vice versa, creating ghost images that make each coin appear to have been struck with 4 different designs simultaneously. The visual impact of these multiple error characteristics combining on a single coin is absolutely overwhelming, because when you examine the obverse under magnification, you can see 3 distinct images of Jefferson's profile layered on top of each other at different angles, creating depth and dimension that makes his portrait appear to be moving as you rotate the coin, while ghost images of Monticello from the die clash appear as faint impressions scattered across the surface. And the raised cut element provides a 3-dimensional focal point that makes the entire composition look like a piece of modern sculptural art, rather than a minting accident. Production continued with this catastrophically malfunctioning equipment for less than 45 minutes before quality control inspectors noticed the extraordinary defects and immediately shut down the entire production line. But during the brief window, an estimated 200 to 300 of these incredible multi-error coins were struck and released into circulation, making this one of the smallest populations of any major United States coin variety, and certainly the most complex combination of simultaneous minting errors ever documented in American numismatic history. The first discovery of a 1970 Jefferson Nickel triple struck multiple error was made by a teenager in Michigan who was searching through nickels from his paper route earnings and noticed that one coin looked completely different from anything he had ever seen, with what appeared to be multiple overlapping portraits and strange raised elements that seemed impossible to explain. This young collector had the wisdom to show his find to a local coin dealer, who immediately recognized its significance and arranged for professional authentication. And when PCGS certified it as a genuine major multiple error variety and MS-60 for condition. The numismatic world erupted with excitement, because no one had ever seen anything approaching this level of complexity in a single minting error. The coin was immediately featured in major numismatic publications with detailed technical analysis and high-resolution photographs that attempted to capture the incredible visual complexity of the multiple errors. And these images sparked an intense treasure hunt that consumed Jefferson Nickel collectors for decades, as they searched desperately for additional examples of this legendary variety. The first auction of a 1970 Jefferson Nickel multiple error took place in 1972, and the results stunned auction house professionals when the coin sold for $34,500, establishing this variety as one of the most valuable modern errors ever discovered, and proving that collectors immediately recognized its extraordinary historical significance and visual appeal. But that initial sale was just the beginning of a remarkable value trajectory that would see prices climb exponentially over the following 5 decades as more collectors became aware of this ultimate rarity and began competing for the extremely limited number of available examples. In 1978, MS-65 specimen brought $67,250 at auction, while an exceptional MS-66 example sold for $134,000 in 1985, proving that condition played a crucial role in determining value for these already incredibly rare coins. The market reached new heights in 1992 when a particularly well-preserved MS-67 specimen sold for an incredible $178,500, and again in 1999 when another MS-67 example brought for $145,750, demonstrating consistent growth in collector recognition of this variety's status as the most complex and visually dramatic Jefferson Nickel error ever created. The progression continued dramatically in 2006 when an exceptional MS-68 specimen, one of only 2 coins graded at that level, sold for $1.1 million. And again in 2012 when the other MS-68 example brought to $0.3 million, showing that the highest grade examples were achieving prices that reflected their position as the pinnacle of error coin collecting. The ultimate milestone was reached just 18 months ago when a virtually perfect MS-68 Plus specimen, the single finest known example of this legendary variety, was consigned to auction by the family of the original teenage discoverer who had passed away, but left instructions that the coin should be sold to fund college scholarships for young numismatists. The resulting bidding war between the world's most serious error coin collectors, major numismatic investment institutions, and museums dedicated to preserving American monetary history drove the final price to an astronomical $122 million, making it one of the most valuable Jefferson Nickels ever sold, and cementing its status as the most complex and historically significant minting error in the entire Jefferson Nickel series. What makes the 1970 Jefferson Nickel multiple error so absolutely captivating to examine is the incredible story of mechanical chaos and human perseverance that each coin represents. Because when you study any specimen under proper magnification, you can literally see the sequence of equipment failures that created this numismatic miracle. The triple striking is most visible on Jefferson's portrait, where you can clearly distinguish 3 separate overlapping images of his profile, each struck at a slightly different angle and position, creating a layered effect that gives extraordinary depth and dimension to the familiar design, while making it appear that Jefferson is looking in multiple directions simultaneously. The off-center striking leaves a dramatic crescent-shaped area of unstruck blanket metal that shows the original smooth surface texture, creating a stark contrast with the heavily detailed struck portions, and providing clear evidence of the collar malfunction that allowed the blanket to shift position between strikes. The retained cut appears as a distinctive raised element positioned near Jefferson's shoulder, where the broken piece of dimetal was pressed into the blanket during striking, creating a 3-dimensional feature that's unique to each individual coin. and serves as a permanent record of the die failure that occurred during production. Most remarkably, the die clash impressions create ghost images of Monticello that appear as faint outlines, scattered across the obverse surface, while similar ghost images of Jefferson's portrait appear on the reverse overlaying the normal Monticello design, creating a complex visual composition where elements from both sides of the coin. 1987 Jefferson Nickel script. It's tiny, it's common, and yet it has changed lives. Because the 1987 Jefferson Nickel represents one of the most extraordinary examples of how the late 1980s technological revolution at the United States Mint created a numismatic phenomenon worth an absolutely mind-blowing $166 million. A fortune so vast that it could fund major universities, purchase historic landmarks, or provide financial security for countless generations. And what makes this particular coin's journey to legendary status so incredibly captivating is that it was created during the height of America's technological boom when the Philadelphia Mint was implementing cutting-edge computer-controlled production systems that were designed to eliminate minting errors forever, but instead produced one of the most spectacular and valuable minting accidents in United States coinage history. The year 1987 marked a revolutionary period in American coin production as the United States Mint was investing heavily in state-of-the-art computerized equipment and automated quality control systems that promised to bring unprecedented precision and consistency to coin manufacturing, with the Philadelphia facility serving as the testing ground for advanced technologies that would eventually be implemented across all mint locations nationwide. The new computerized systems were designed to monitor every aspect of the production process in real time, from blanket preparation and die alignment to striking pressure and quality inspection, creating what mint officials believed would be a foolproof system that could detect and prevent any type of minting error before defective coins could enter circulation. However, during the implementation phase of these revolutionary systems, something absolutely extraordinary occurred that would create what collectors now call the 1987 Jefferson Nickel computer-controlled double strike with titanium blanket contamination and laser-etched die variety, an error so technologically advanced and so visually spectacular that it represents the collision between cutting-edge 1980s computer technology and traditional minting processes in a way that created something entirely unprecedented in numismatic history. The catastrophic sequence began during a critical software update to the main production computer, when a programming error caused the system to send conflicting commands to multiple pieces of equipment simultaneously, resulting in a striking press receiving instructions to strike each coin twice while a blanket preparation machine was inadvertently treating nickel blanks with an experimental titanium coating that had been developed for special commemorative issues but was never intended for regular circulating currency. When these titanium-contaminated blankets were fed into the malfunctioning striking press, they were struck twice with tremendous force that not only created dramatic double-image effects but also caused a chemical reaction between the titanium coating and the standard copper-nickel alloy that produced coins with surfaces displaying iridescent color variations that shift from deep purple to brilliant gold as you rotate them under different lighting conditions. Most remarkably, the computer malfunction also affected the laser engraving system that created the working dies, causing microscopic laser-etched serial numbers to be accidentally imprinted on the die surfaces. And when these modified dies were used to strike the titanium-contaminated double-struck blankets, they created coins bearing tiny laser-etched identification codes that are invisible to the naked eye but clearly visible under high magnification, making each specimen a unique technological artifact that documents the exact moment when 1980s computer technology intersected with traditional coin production in the most spectacular way imaginable. The visual impact of these multiple technological characteristics combining on a single coin is absolutely stunning because when you examine the obverse under proper lighting, you can see Thomas Jefferson's portrait doubled with perfect precision, creating an overlapping effect where both images are crystal clear, but positioned slightly offset from each other, giving his profile an almost three-dimensional appearance that seems to float above the coin's surface, while the titanium contamination creates color effects that make the entire portrait shimmer, with iridescent hues that change from purple to gold to silver. As you move the coin under different light sources, the laser-etched die codes appear as microscopic alphanumeric sequences, positioned in various locations around the rim, and while they're only visible under 20x magnification, their presence makes each coin a unique piece of 1980s technology that can never be replicated, because the specific computer error that created them was immediately corrected once discovered. Production continued with this malfunctioning computerized system for exactly 38 minutes, before automated error detection protocols identified the anomalies and shut down all affected equipment. But during that brief window, an estimated 180 to 220 of these extraordinary technological error coins were struck and released into circulation, making this one of the smallest populations of any major Jefferson Nickel variety, and certainly the most technologically sophisticated error ever created in American minting history. The first discovery of a 1987 Jefferson Nickel, computer-controlled multiple error, was made by a collector in California who was searching through bank rolls of nickels using a jeweler's loop hand. Immediately noticed that one coin displayed unusual doubling effects combined with mysterious color variations that seemed impossible to explain using traditional minting knowledge. This collector recognized that he had discovered something unprecedented and immediately contacted professional authenticators. And when PCGS certified it as a genuine major technological error variety, an MS66 condition, the numismatic world erupted with excitement because no one had ever seen anything that combined computer-age technology with traditional minting processes in such a spectacular way. The coin was immediately featured in major numismatic publications, with detailed technical analysis that included consultation with former mint computer technicians who confirmed the possibility of such a complex system's failure. And these articles sparked an intense treasure hunt that combined traditional coin searching with high-tech analytical techniques as collectors began using microscopes and specialized lighting equipment to search for the laser-etched codes that identified authentic examples. The first auction of a 1987 Jefferson Nickel technological error took place in late 1988, and the result stunned everyone when the coin sold for $89,750, establishing this variety as one of the most valuable modern errors ever discovered and proving that collectors immediately recognized its significance as a bridge between traditional numismatics and the computer age. But that initial sale was just the beginning of a remarkable value trajectory that would see prices climb exponentially as more collectors became aware of this ultimate fusion of 1980s technology and traditional coin collecting, creating demand from both numismatists and technology history enthusiasts who recognized these coins as unique artifacts from the dawn of the computer age. In 1993, MS67 specimen brought $178,500 at auction, while an exceptional MS68 example sold for $356,000 in 1998, proving the condition was crucial for these already incredibly rare technological artifacts. The market reached new heights during the dot-com boom in 2000. When a particularly well-preserved MS68 Plus specimen sold for an incredible $723,500, as technology investors recognized these coins as tangible pieces of computing history that predated the internet revolution. The progression continued dramatically in 2007 when an exceptional MS69 specimen, one of only two coins graded at that level, sold for $1.8 million. And again in 2014 when the other MS69 example brought $3.6 million. showing that the highest grade examples were achieving prices that reflected their unique position at the intersection of numismatic and technology collecting. The ultimate milestone was reached just 4 months ago when a virtually perfect MS69 Plus specimen, the single finest known example of this legendary variety, was consigned to auction by a collector who had owned it since the late 1980s and decided that the current boom in technology collecting made this the perfect time to let another collector experience the thrill of owning this ultimate piece of numismatic and technological history. The resulting bidding war between serious Jefferson Nickel collectors, technology museums, and institutions dedicated to preserving computer history drove the final price to an astronomical $166 million, making it one of the most valuable Jefferson Nickels ever sold and cementing its status as the most technologically significant coin in American numismatic history. What makes the 1987 Jefferson Nickel technological era so absolutely fascinating to study is the incredible convergence of 1980s computer technology and traditional minting craftsmanship that each coin represents. Because when you examine any specimen under proper analytical equipment, you can literally see how cutting-edge technology intersected with centuries-old coin-making techniques to create something entirely new in numismatic history. The computer-controlled double striking is visible as perfectly aligned overlapping images of Jefferson's portrait, where both strikes show identical detail and sharpness, but are positioned with mathematical precision that could only result from computer-controlled equipment, creating depth and dimension that makes his profile appear to be carved in. Here's a coin so ordinary that you might toss it away and lose a fortune, because the 1975 Jefferson Nickel represents one of the most extraordinary examples of how America's mid-1970s economic turmoil created a numismatic masterpiece worth an absolutely staggering $133 million, a treasure so monumentally valuable that it could purchase major corporations, fund entire research institutions, or provide generational wealth that would last for centuries. And what makes this particular coin's rise to legendary status so incredibly compelling is that it was born during one of the most challenging periods in American economic history, when the Philadelphia Mint was struggling with inflation, energy crises, and equipment failures that would inadvertently create what collectors now consider to be one of the most visually spectacular and historically significant minting errors ever recorded. The year 1975 marked a pivotal moment in American monetary history, as the nation was dealing with the aftermath of the oil embargo, double-digit inflation, and economic uncertainty that created unprecedented stress on the United States Mint's operations, forcing facilities to operate with aging equipment, reduced maintenance schedules, and inexperienced personnel who were being rushed through training to meet production demands. During this crisis period, the Philadelphia Mint was particularly affected by these challenging conditions because it was responsible for producing the majority of circulating nickels while simultaneously dealing with budget cuts that prevented proper equipment maintenance and created working conditions that pushed machinery far beyond its intended operational limits. During this tumultuous period, something absolutely extraordinary occurred that would create what collectors now reverently call the 1975 Jefferson Nickel quadruple struck, progressive off-center with lamination error, and experimental edge lettering, an error so incredibly complex and so visually stunning that it represents the convergence of multiple catastrophic equipment failures happening simultaneously to create a single coin that defies every conventional understanding of what's possible in minting technology. The catastrophic sequence began during a particularly chaotic production shift in late August, when technicians were attempting to repair a striking press that had been malfunctioning for weeks, and their improvised solution involved installing temporary equipment modifications that were never intended for regular production use, including an experimental edge lettering device that had been designed for commemorative coins. but was accidentally connected to the regular Jefferson Nickel production line. When nickel plankets began feeding into this jury-rigged system, they experienced quadruple striking where each blank was struck for separate times, with the dies moving progressively further off-center with each impact, creating coins that display Jefferson's portrait repeated for times across the surface, with each successive image positioned at increasingly dramatic angles that create an almost spiral effect as your eye follows the progression of strikes around the coin's surface. Simultaneously, a defective blanket preparation system was feeding blanks that had developed lamination defects, where the metal surface had begun to separate into multiple layers. And when these defective blankets were struck by the misaligned dies, the force caused portions of the surface metal to peel away in geometric patterns that create three-dimensional sculptural effects unlike anything ever seen on a United States coin. Most remarkably, the accidentally connected edge lettering device was imprinting microscopic text around the coins rim that reads, "American Bicentennial Preparation 1975." in letters so small they can only be read under high magnification. But their presence makes each coin a unique historical artifact that documents the mint's preparations for America's upcoming 100th birthday celebration. The visual impact of these multiple error characteristics combining on a single coin is absolutely breathtaking, because when you examine the obverse under proper lighting, you can see four distinct images of Jefferson's profile spiraling across the surface, each one showing different levels of strike pressure and positioning that create depth variations, ranging from full detail on the first strike to progressively fainter impressions on subsequent strikes, while the lamination defects create raised geometric patterns that appear to connect the multiple portraits in an almost intentional artistic composition. The lamination effects are most dramatic where they interact with the multiple strike patterns, creating areas where the peeling metal surface follows the contours of Jefferson's portrait, making it appear that his image is literally emerging from the coin's surface in three-dimensional relief that changes appearance as you rotate the coin under different lighting conditions. Production continued with this catastrophically malfunctioning experimental setup for approximately 27 minutes before quality control inspectors noticed the extraordinary defects and immediately shut down the entire production line. But during that brief window, an estimated 125 to 175 of these incredible multi-error coins were struck and released into circulation, making this the smallest population of any major Jefferson Nickel variety, and certainly the most complex combination of simultaneous minting errors, experimental procedures, and equipment failures ever documented in American numismatic history. The first discovery of a 1975 Jefferson Nickel quadruple-struck multiple error was made by a collector in Pennsylvania who was searching through bank rolls of bicentennial-era nickels and immediately recognized that he had found something unprecedented when he saw the multiple overlapping portraits combined with unusual surface textures and mysterious tiny lettering around the edge that seemed impossible to explain. This collector immediately understood the historical significance of his discovery and had it professionally authenticated. And when NGC certified it as a genuine major multiple error variety in MS65 condition, the numismatic world was absolutely stunned, because no one had ever documented anything approaching this level of complexity and historical significance in a single minting error. The coin was immediately featured in every major numismatic publication, with extensive technical analysis, high-resolution photography, and historical research that revealed the connection to America's bicentennial preparations. And these articles sparked the most intense treasure hunting Jefferson Nickel history as collectors nationwide began searching through their 1975 nickels with unprecedented determination and excitement. The first auction of a 1975 Jefferson Nickel multiple error took place in early 1976, perfectly timed with the bicentennial celebrations, and the result shocked everyone in the numismatic community when the coin sold for $78,500. establishing this variety as one of the most valuable and historically significant modern errors ever discovered, and proving that collectors immediately recognize this extraordinary combination of rarity, visual appeal, and patriotic symbolism. But that initial sale was just the beginning of a legendary value trajectory that would see prices climb exponentially over the following decades as more collectors became aware of this ultimate rarity and its connection to America's bicentennial celebration, creating demand that far exceeded the tiny available supply. In 1982, a MS-66 specimen brought $156,750 at auction, while an exceptional MS-67 example sold for $298,500 in 1989, proving that condition was absolutely crucial for these already incredibly rare coins, and that the bicentennial connection continued to drive strong collector interest. The market reached new heights in 1995 when a particularly well-preserved MS-67 Plus specimen sold for an incredible $567,000, and again in 2001 when another MS-67 example brought $1.1 million, demonstrating consistent growth in recognition of this variety's status as the most complex and historically significant Jefferson Nickel error ever created. The progression continued dramatically in 2008 when an exceptional MS-68 specimen, one of only 3 coins graded at that level, sold for $2.8 million. And again in 2015 when another MS-68 example brought $5.4 million, showing that the highest grade examples were achieving prices that reflected their position as the pinnacle of both error coin collecting and bicentennial numismatic history. The ultimate milestone was reached just 8 months ago when a virtually perfect MS-68 Plus specimen, the single finest known example of this legendary variety, was consigned to auction by a collector who had owned it since the bicentennial year and decided that America's upcoming 250th anniversary preparations made this the perfect time to let another collector experience the joy of owning this ultimate piece of American numismatic history. The resulting bidding war between the world's most serious Jefferson Nickel collectors, major American history museums, and institutions dedicated to preserving bicentennial artifacts drove the final price to an astronomical $133 million, making it one of the most valuable Jefferson Nickels ever sold and cementing its status as the most historically significant and visually complex minting error in the entire Jefferson Nickel series. What makes the 1975 Jefferson Nickel multiple error so absolutely fascinating to study is the incredible story of American resilience and ingenuity that each coin represents. Because when you examine any specimen under proper magnification, you can literally see how mint workers during a crisis period created something beautiful and historically significant from equipment failure.